The year is 2023. The place is the office of the Prairie Grain Cooperative. It smells of dust and decade-old coffee, of paperwork and quiet certainty. Frank Miller sits behind his father's desk. He is 74 years old. His hands are thick with a farmer's life. Even though he's managed this co-op for 50 years, he is a respected man, a good man. He sits on the church board, coached Little League for 2 generations. People trust Frank. His word is his bond. Today, a journalist is here. From Paris, of all places. A young woman with a notebook and a quiet intensity. She asks about yields, about modern hybrids, about the business of feeding the world. Frank answers with practiced ease. He talks about bushels per acre, protein content, resistance to blight. He speaks the language of efficiency, the language of the market, the language of what is possible. The journalist listens politely. She nods. Then she reaches into her leather bag. She pulls out a small, heavy paper sack of flour. The design is simple, elegant. The words are French. Boulangerie Voisin, Paris. A name Frank has never heard. The journalist slides it across the desk. Frank picks it up. The paper feels expensive. He reads the description below the famous bakery's name. Farine de blé rouge ancien, ancient red wheat flour. And below that, in smaller type, cultivé et moulu par Thorn Farms, Millwood, USA. Grown and milled by Thorn Farms. Millwood. That's 3 miles down the road. Frank feels something he cannot quite name. A cold space opening in his chest. He looks at the journalist. Her face is neutral. She says, "This flour is considered the best in the world for a certain kind of bread. The Voisin bakery flies it in every month. They pay $60 a kilo." Frank does the math in his head. The number doesn't make sense. It is an impossible number. He looks at the name again. Thorn Farms. Elias Thorn. He remembers a boy, a long time ago. A boy with one arm, standing in this very office, holding a jar of dark, reddish wheat kernels. And Frank, being kind, being responsible, being certain, telling that boy the truth. "This stuff is worthless, son. You can't build a future on a memory." This channel tells the stories of people who were told no. People who were told it was impossible. People who built their future on a memory anyway. If you believe these stories matter, if you believe in the quiet power of proving people wrong, subscribe. Because the world is full of gatekeepers. And we are here to tell you about the people who walked around the gate. Let me tell you about Elias Thorn. It was March of 1985. His father had been gone 6 months, a heart that gave out in the middle of a winter field. Elias was 22. He had one good arm. The other was gone below the elbow, a combine accident when he was 16. The farm was drowning in debt. The bank owned most of the equipment. The land was tired. The soil was thin. Everyone in town knew the story. They felt sorry for the Thorn boy. A good kid, a tough break. Too much responsibility for one man, especially a man with one arm. Elias knew what they were saying. He heard the whispers at the feed store. He saw the pity in their eyes at church. He ignored it. He had a plan, a desperate plan, a foolish plan. He found the old tin in his grandfather's workshop, tucked away on a high shelf, covered in a thick layer of dust. Inside were seeds, dark red kernels of wheat, smaller than modern wheat, harder. The label, written in his grandfather's elegant script, said, "Thorn Red, harvest of 1958. The last harvest before his grandfather switched to the new hybrids the government recommended, the high-yield wheat that fed the world, and slowly starved the soil. Elias held the seeds in his palm. They felt different, heavy, alive. He took a small jar of them to the co-op. He went to see Frank Miller. Frank was in his 30s then, already managing the place, already earning the town's trust. He was a good man. Elias knew that. His father had always said so. Frank Miller is a square dealer. He'll do right by you. Elias believed it. That's why he went. He needed a loan for seed and fertilizer, but he wasn't going to plant the co-op's hybrid. He was going to plant this. He was going to plant Thorn Red. Frank's office was the same then as it is now, the same heavy oak desk, the same calendar from the seed company on the wall. Frank greeted Elias with a warm, sad smile. "Elias, son, I was so sorry to hear about your father. He was a good man, a fine farmer." Elias nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." He placed the glass jar on the desk. The red kernels caught the light. "I want to plant this." Frank picked up the jar. He swirled the seeds around. His expression was patient, kind. He looked at Elias. "Where did you get this?" "It was my grandfather's." Frank nodded slowly. "I remember it. They called it stubborn wheat. Grows tall as your shoulder. Stems are thin. Wind knocks it down. It's a devil to harvest. And the yield, son, the yield is half of what you'd get from a modern strain, maybe less." "I know," Elias said, "but the quality." Frank held up a hand, a gentle, stopping motion. "Let me be straight with you, Elias. Because I respected your father, and I respect you for trying to keep the farm going." He leaned forward. His voice was low, concerned. "There is no market for this. Nobody wants it. The big mills, they won't touch it. It needs special equipment. The protein is inconsistent. The color is wrong. It's a novelty, a museum piece." Elias felt his hope shrinking. "But the taste. My grandmother used to make bread." "I know, son, I know. My mother did too, and it was good bread. But that world is gone. We're in the business of volume now. We're in the business of survival. You have debts to pay. You have a farm to save. You can't do that with this." Frank slid a piece of paper across the desk. A loan application for the co-op's recommended seed. A modern hybrid, dependable, high yield, guaranteed. "This is your future," he said. "This is how you survive." Elias looked at the paper. Then he looked at the jar of red wheat. "I think I can make it work." Frank sighed. It was a heavy sound, full of regret, full of certainty. "Elias, you're a good kid, but you're working with one arm. You're working with your father's old equipment. You're working with a mountain of debt. You can't afford a mistake. You can't afford a bad year, and this is a guaranteed bad year. I can't in good conscience loan you money for it. I can't be the man who helps you lose your family's farm." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was kind. It was a kindness that felt like a locked door. A kindness that said, "I know your limits better than you do. I am doing this to protect you from yourself." Elias stood up. He took the jar of seeds. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just looked at Frank. And in that moment, he understood. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. He walked out of the office. The bell on the co-op door tinkled behind him. He felt the eyes of the other farmers on his back. He felt their pity. He felt their certainty. the certainty of sensible men. Elias drove home in his father's old Ford truck. The silence in the cab was deafening. Frank Miller's words echoed in his head. "I can't be the man who helps you lose your family's farm." He was trying to help. Elias knew that. That's what made it so hard. It wasn't a fight against a villain. It was a fight against good intentions, against common sense, against the crushing weight of what everyone believed to be true. He pulled into the farmyard. The barn needed paint. The house needed a new roof. The fences were sagging. He could see the debt everywhere he looked. His grandfather was sitting on the porch swing. He was 89 years old. His mind was still sharp as a tack. His eyes missed nothing. He watched Elias get out of the truck. He saw the look on his face. "Well?" the old man asked. Elias sat down on the porch steps. He didn't look at his grandfather. He looked at the tired gray soil of the yard. He said no. Just that. He said the wheat is worthless. Said there's no market for it. Said I'd be bankrupt in a year. The porch swing creaked, a slow, rhythmic sound. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields that had been in their family for 100 years, fields they were about to lose. Finally, his grandfather spoke. His voice was quiet, but clear as a bell. "Frank Miller is a good man. He knows the market. He knows numbers. He knows what the big companies want to buy." He paused. The swing stopped creaking. "But he doesn't know this land, not like we do. He's forgotten what the soil wants. He's forgotten what the bread wants." Elias looked up. His grandfather was holding the old seed tin, the one from the workshop. He held it out to Elias. "They took your arm, son. They took your father. The bank is trying to take this farm. They've taken damn near everything. But they haven't taken the dirt. And they haven't taken this." Elias took the tin. It felt heavy in his hand, a weight of history, a burden of hope. His grandfather looked him square in the eye. "The land remembers this grain. The bread remembers it too." That was it. No grand speech, no argument, just a simple statement of a deeper truth. In that moment, the fight was no longer lonely. Elias stood up. He walked to the machine shed. He had a few $100s his father had saved in a coffee can. It wasn't enough for the co-op seed. It wasn't enough for fertilizer, but it was enough for fuel. He had a small field behind the barn, about 10 acres, hidden from the road. The soil there was better. His grandfather had always said so. He would start there. He spent the next 2 weeks prepping the field, alone, from dawn until his body gave out at night. He learned how to do a 2-man job with one arm and his teeth. He learned the geometry of leverage, the physics of patience. He found his father's old seed drill. It was a wreck, but he cleaned it, oiled it, welded the broken parts. He calibrated it for the small, hard, thorn-red seeds, and one cool April morning, he planted them. He planted all of them, every last seed from the tin. He bet the farm. He bet his future on a memory, on his grandfather's words. "The land remembers this grain." Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend, by someone who genuinely believed they were protecting you. What did you do? Let me know in the comments below, because what Elias Thorne did next changed everything. The wheat grew. It grew tall, taller than anyone had seen wheat grow in 50 years. It was a beautiful sight, a field of deep reddish gold, waving in the wind. But Frank Miller had been right about one thing. The stems were thin. A summer thunderstorm laid a quarter of the field flat. Elias walked the edge of the flattened section. He felt a cold dread, but he didn't quit. Harvest was the real test. His father's combine was a John Deere 7720, a beast, designed for modern, short-stemmed, thick-stalked wheat. He tried a single pass on the Thorn Red. The reel speed was too fast. It shattered the delicate heads, sent the precious grain flying into the dirt. He stopped the machine. He sat in the cab, the engine idling, and for the first time, he felt the icy grip of despair. Frank was right. The neighbors were right. He was a fool. He drove the combine back to the shed. He didn't go back to the field for 2 days. On the third day, a pickup truck rattled into his yard. It was Arlo Finch, an old mechanic who ran a repair shop on the edge of town. Arlo was 70. He'd known Elias's grandfather. He got out of his truck, walked over to where Elias was sitting on the porch steps. "Heard you're having trouble." Elias just nodded. Arlo squinted at the John Deere in the shed. Wrong tool for the job, like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Elias looked at him. "It's all I've got." Arlo chewed on an unlit cigar. "Nope." He walked over to a forgotten corner of the yard, under a rotting canvas tarp. He pulled the tarp back. There sat an old Allis-Chalmers Gleaner, Model A, from the 1950s. It hadn't run in 20 years. "This is the tool," Arlo said. "Your granddad harvested that red wheat with this very machine. It's gentler, slower, but it's broke." "I know," Arlo said with a grin. "That's the fun part." For the next month, they worked. Arlo came by every day after closing his shop. He wouldn't take a dime, just a cup of coffee and a shared silence. They rebuilt the engine, replaced the belts, but the real innovation was in the harvest reel. Arlo had an idea. They welded new slats onto the reel, covered them in thick rubber. They rigged a new pulley system to slow the reel speed way down, to gently brush the wheat heads into the combine, not beat them in. It was a custom job, an invention born of necessity. By the time they were done, the rest of the county had finished their harvest. Elias's field of red wheat stood alone. The neighbors watched him drive the old, rumbling Allis-Chalmers into the field. They shook their heads. Poor kid just doesn't know when to quit. But it worked. The modified combine moved slowly, painfully slowly, but it worked. It gently combed the grain from the stalks. The loss was minimal. It took him a week to harvest 10 acres, but he did it. He had a small mountain of thorn red wheat stored in his barn. It wasn't much, maybe 400 bushels, not enough to sell to the co-op, even if they would take it. But it was his. He had done it. He had taken the first step. The problem was, he was now completely broke, and no mill would touch his strange, hard red wheat. So he took another step. He sold his father's good truck, the Ford. He bought an older, beat-up Chevy. And with the difference, he bought a small stone-grinding flour mill, a Meadows mill, Model 8. He set it up in the barn, taught himself how to run it, how to get the grind just right. The flour it produced was incredible, soft, a pale reddish-brown color. It smelled nutty, almost spicy. He put the flour in simple brown paper bags, stamped them with a hand-carved stamp, Thorn Farms, Heritage Red Wheat. He took a card table and 100 bags to the farmer's market in the city. He sat there all day. People walked by. They looked at his flour. They looked at the price. It was 4 times the price of flour in the supermarket. They moved on. By the end of the day, he had sold 3 bags. He felt the familiar chill of failure. As he was packing up, A young woman came to his table. She was a chef. Her name was Sarah. She picked up a bag of his flour. "What is this?" she asked. He told her the story, the whole story. His grandfather, the seeds, the co-op, the combine. She listened. She opened the bag and smelled the flour. Her eyes widened. "I'll take 10 bags," she said. Elias was stunned. That was nearly all he had left. The next Saturday, she was back. "I need everything you have," she said. "The bread I made with this, it's like nothing I have ever tasted. My customers are going crazy." She became his first customer, his only customer for that first year. But she was enough. That winter, Elias didn't take a vacation. He didn't buy a new TV. He took every dollar Sarah paid him, and he bought fertilizer, he bought fuel, and in the spring he planted 40 acres of thorn red. He was still broke. He was still working alone. But for the first time since his father died, he had a flicker of something that felt like hope. The next few years were a blur of work, hard, relentless work. By 1990, Sarah's restaurant was famous, partly because of her bread. The bread she made with Thorn Farms flour. Other chefs started calling. Elias was selling every bag he could mill. That fall, he walked into the county assessor's office. He bought back the 20 acres his father had been forced to sell 5 years earlier. He paid for it in full. Cash. Frank Miller at the co-op heard about it. He didn't say anything. He just made a note. By 1995, a food writer from Chicago wrote a story. A small story in the Sunday magazine. About a one-armed farmer and his grandfather's magic wheat. The phone started ringing. Bakeries in Minneapolis, in St. Louis. Elias had to hire his first employee, a local kid to help with the milling. That year, he bought another 80 acres. The farm next door, which had gone into foreclosure. He paid the bank's asking price, cash. He built a new, dedicated milling shed, 2 bigger stone mills, paid for the materials and the labor up front, cash. Frank Miller saw the new building go up. He drove past the Thorn Farm on his way home. He saw the fields of tall red wheat. They looked out of place, like a memory someone had forgotten to erase. He saw Elias in town, driving a new truck, a new Chevy, not fancy, but new. Elias always nodded politely. "Hello, Mr. Miller." Frank always nodded back. Elias. They never spoke of the meeting in his office. It hung in the air between them, unspoken, unresolved. By 2002, Thorn Farms was shipping flour to 37 bakeries in 7 states. Elias had 4 full-time employees. He bought another 160 acres, cash. He was meticulous with his soil. He practiced crop rotation. He used natural fertilizers. His land was coming back to life. The dirt was getting darker, richer. The worms had returned. While his neighbors were pouring more and more chemicals on their land just to get the same yields. Elias's yields of thorn red were slowly, naturally increasing. The community was split. Some of the old-timers still thought he was a fool. "It's a fad," they'd say at the co-op. "People will get tired of expensive bread." But the younger farmers were watching. They saw his debt-free expansion. They saw his direct market. They saw him getting prices they could only dream of. They started asking questions. Not at the co-op. They went straight to Elias. He always had time for them. He shared what he knew. He gave away seeds. He didn't see them as competition. He saw them as fellow survivors. By 2010, the first email from Europe arrived. A Michelin-starred chef in Paris. He had tasted bread made from thorn flour in New York. He wanted to try it. Elias sent a 10-kilo bag. 2 weeks later, an order came in for 200 kilos. The shipping was a nightmare to figure out, but he did it. That same year, the final piece of the original Thorne homestead came up for sale. The 80 acres his grandfather had lost during the Depression. Elias went to the auction. He stood in the back. He didn't say a word until the very end. He made one bid. It was 20% higher than the last one. The auctioneer's gavel fell. Sold to Elias Thorne. He wrote the check right there. Cash. He now owned all the land his family had ever owned, and more. He had rebuilt the farm, seed by seed, bag by bag, acre by acre, all because a man in an office, a good man, had told him it was worthless. All because he chose to believe in the land and not the market. This brings us back to 2023, to Frank Miller's office. The French journalist is waiting for an answer. Frank is still looking at the bag of flour. Thorne Farms. He feels the weight of the last 40 years, the weight of his own certainty. He had been so sure he was right, so sure he was helping. He had watched Elias from a distance. He saw the success. He told himself it was a fluke, a niche market, a lucky break. But this bag of flour in his hand, from Paris, this felt different. This felt like a verdict. He finally looks up at the journalist. "Yes," he says, his voice raspy. "I know him." The journalist's name is Isabel. She senses a story, a much bigger story than just a heritage grain. She spends the next week in Millwood. She interviews Elias. She interviews his grandfather, now 123 years old and still sharp. She interviews the chefs Elias sells to. And then she asks for one more thing. She asks if Elias and Frank would be willing to sit down together at the farm. Elias agrees immediately. Frank hesitates for a full day. Then he agrees too. They meet at Elias's kitchen table. It's the same table his mother served dinner on. Through the window, you can see the fields of Thorne red, ready for harvest. Frank looks old, smaller than Elias remembers. He won't meet Elias's eye. He just stares at his hands on the table. The journalist, Isabel, is there, but she stays quiet. She just lets the silence stretch. Finally, Frank speaks. "I was wrong." He says it to the table, not to Elias. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you. The market back then, there was no place for that wheat. You have to understand." Elias listens. He doesn't interrupt. He just lets Frank talk. "I watched you," Frank continues. "All these years, I saw you working. I saw you build this. I told myself it wouldn't last. I was proud of my own judgment." He finally looks at Elias. There is a deep, weary sadness in his eyes. "I came here to apologize, Elias, for not believing in you, for not giving you that loan." The kitchen is quiet. The only sound is the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Elias gets up. He walks over to a shelf on the wall. He takes down the original seed tin, the one his grandfather gave him. It's dented and worn, but he keeps it polished. He places it on the table between them. "You don't need to apologize for the loan, Frank." His voice is calm, not angry, not triumphant, just factual. "Not getting that loan was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to do it myself. No debt, no partners, just the land and the work." Frank looks confused. "Then what are you saying?" Elias leans forward. He looks Frank square in the eye. "You were right about the market, Frank. In 1985, the market said this wheat was worthless. You gave me good advice for that world. But there was one thing you never did. You never once asked what the wheat itself was worth. what it was worth to the soil, what it was worth to the people who ate the bread. You saw a number on a ledger. I saw a legacy in a seed. You don't need to apologize for being a good businessman, but the thing that I can't forget is that you looked at me, a kid with one arm trying to save his family's farm, and you told me my limits. You drew a circle around me and said, "This is as far as you can go," and you did it with kindness. That's the thing that gets me. Your kindness felt like a cage. Frank Miller doesn't say a word. He just sits there, a good man, a certain man, confronting the true cost of his certainty. There is no forgiveness asked, and none is given. There is only the quiet truth, sitting on the table between them, in a dented old tin. Elias Thorne is in his 60s now. He still works the farm, but he has help. His son, who has his grandfather's eyes, manages the fields. His daughter, who has a degree in agronomy and a mind for business, manages the company. Thorne Farms is now one of the largest distributors of heritage grains in North America. They don't just sell Thorne Red anymore. They've helped bring back a dozen other forgotten varieties: Spelt, Einkorn, Emmer. They work with a network of over 50 small farms, all of them started by young farmers who came to Elias for advice. Farmers who wanted to get off the commodity treadmill. Farmers who wanted to heal their soil. In 2015, Elias used the profits from a single year to create a foundation. The Thorne Heritage Grain Foundation. It gives out grants, scholarships for students studying sustainable agriculture, interest-free loans to farmers transitioning to organic and heritage methods. It runs a seed bank, a library of agricultural biodiversity, free for any farmer who wants to try something different. The foundation's motto is simple. It's printed on the wall of their small office in Millwood. It's a quote from Elias's grandfather. "The land remembers." The Prairie Grain Cooperative is still in business, but it's smaller now. Many of the local farmers sell directly to niche markets, following the path Elias blazed. They get better prices. They have more control. Frank Miller retired a few years after that meeting at Elias's farm. They say he's quiet now, that he spends most of his time in his garden. Sometimes, on his way into town, he drives the long way around, past the Thorne farm. He looks at the fields. He sees the new silos, the solar panels on the barns, the trucks being loaded with flour destined for places he's only seen on a map. He sees a world built from something he declared worthless, a quiet testament, a witness to what grows in the space between what people say you can do and what you know you must. Elias Thorne doesn't think about Frank Miller much anymore. He thinks about the soil. He thinks about the weather. He thinks about the next generation. He sits at his kitchen table, the same table where he faced his doubter. The old seed tin is on the mantelpiece, a physical artifact of a quiet decision made 40 years ago. Sometimes he takes it down, holds it in his hands, feels the weight of it, the weight of a legacy. Not a legacy of money or land, but a legacy of possibility. The story of Elias Thorne is not just about wheat. It's about value. It's about who gets to decide what something is worth. A market? A committee? A man behind a desk who thinks he's being kind? Or is value something deeper? Something that lives in the soil, in our history, in the quiet, stubborn belief that what is unique about you is not a weakness. It is your greatest strength. Right now, somewhere in the world, a young person with a new idea is being told no. They are being told it's impossible, impractical, worthless. They are being told this by good people, by sensible people, by people who are certain they know better. This story is for them. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. It cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven, with decades of quiet work, with a belief in the seed you carry, and the courage to plant it in a world that says it will not grow. If this story means something to you, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories the world needs to hear. In the comments, tell us about a time you were told no and what you did next. And finally, share this story. Share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that the thing somebody else calls worthless might just be the thing that saves you, might just be the thing that changes the world. 1 acre, 1 seed, 1 quiet decision at a time.